What's up, everyone? This is Ryan here, and you're watching another potentially long-winded, rambly, self-righteous reflections video. So, what I wanted to, if you've never watched any of these videos before, just a heads up, this is entirely unscripted, and I'm not really trying to convince you of anything. I'm really just reflecting on my own experience. And if that happens to be useful to you, then that's great. And if not, that's fine too. So I don't really plan these. I don't really know when I'm going to make one of these videos until I wake up on a given day and feel like making one. And something which has been on my mind quite a bit lately is cultivating a good decision-making apparatus. So when I say apparatus, I'm really speaking of the human brain, my brain, but this may apply to your brain as well. So, but before I get there, what I wanted to talk about is kind of decision making and how it works. So I'm not an expert in neurochemistry or neuroscience, but I did read a book on it once. And one thing that I took away from that book is if we imagine that in a given moment of time, when the brain is about to make a decision, the brain basically has a number of different neurons, or I'm actually going to move away from the biology and say like potential decisions in a given moment in time. So to give a practical example, this morning I'm lying in bed for about 10 minutes, having trouble getting back to sleep, so I grab my phone and check the phone to see what time it is, and it's about 4:50 a.m. So in that exact moment of time, I had a couple different conflicting thoughts occurring. So one of the thoughts was, I should sleep in. Another thought was, it's cold. And then after a couple minutes of that, it was, well, you went to bed really early last night. You've got a lot of work to do today. And then that side of things starts to kind of gain momentum. And then before I know it, I'm out of bed. So what I'm pointing to here is that in a given moment of time or a short period, whether or not it's 100% true, biologically speaking, I think a way of framing your thoughts and by extension your decision-making capacity or apparatus is to realize that the thing that actually will make you choose decision A or B or C or D is based on, to go back to the biology, how much excitatory, this is where I'm confusing myself, every neuron has excitatory chemicals in it. So excitatory meaning fires the electrical charge, and then every neuron has inhibitory chemicals in it which will prevent it from firing. And so in a given moment of time, if the I need to get out of bed decision has enough excitatory chemicals versus the I need to stay in bed and sleep in sort of set of neurons or whatever, if this one has more excitatory chemicals in it, then that one will fire. So Again, obviously I don't understand it especially well, but what I'm trying to point to here is that we very often frame decisions as, well, in my case, because I'm a very analytical thinker, I typically frame decisions in the sense of, if I just think about it long enough and hard enough, then I'll make the right decision. Now, what I've learned over time is that that's not actually generally a good way to approach decisions, whether they're big or small decisions. So what I mean by that is that discursive analytical part of the decision-making apparatus, which is useful, I'm not discounting it, it can basically become corrupted. And then all of a sudden, instead of a tool which can look at different useful, vital pieces of information and say, okay, well, yeah, I could sleep in, but I know what happens when I sleep in. I usually feel like garbage for the rest of the day. And I went to bed at 7:30 p.m. last night, so it's not like I'm underslept. So it can head that in that direction, which is sort of more supportive, or it can head in the other direction, which is the just trying to justify not getting out of bed. So what I've found over the years is that in a moment of time, I typically don't have direct control over whether my decision-making apparatus will support option A or option B. What I've found, though, is that there are things I can do day to day, moments before, hours before, days before a given decision, a given moment in time, which will tend to help me move towards option A as opposed to option B. And the same is true vice versa. There are things I can do every day which will kind of give more momentum, give more excitatory chemicals to option B and kind of give that momentum. So that kind of leads me to what I've written up on the board here, which is don't worry about making perfect decisions. As like in the moment, if I can just focus hard enough, I'll come to the right answer. What I would instead, what has supported me very well is doing things every day which cultivate a mind which tends to make good decisions. And also, and this is something I'm not great at, doing my best to not indulge in moods and habits which kind of push my decision-making apparatus in what I would call the wrong direction. So the difficulty here, as you may have noticed, is that if we can't really trust our decision-making capacity 100%, because either it won't have adequate information to make a good judgment, or it will just be compromised. Maybe you're really angry. I notice when I'm really angry, I tend to do things that I regret. Not always, but it becomes very challenging to make good decisions when I'm angry. When I'm really indulging in a whole bunch of, just eating a bunch of junk food and all the other mood adjusters which I'm happy to indulge in, very often when I'm in that kind of, yes, that indulgent, oh, this junk food is so delicious kind of state, then my whole decision-making apparatus just kind of withers away, and then it just becomes about moment-to-moment pleasure instead of like goals, long-term perspective, those kinds of things. So what I'm trying to point to here is assuming you have a goal, or you have a habit you'd like to adopt, or you have a habit that you'd like to get rid of, your success rate in doing so is largely going to be determined by your ability to have a decision-making apparatus moment to moment, which supports your goal, your purpose. Since we already know that this capacity is imperfect to begin with, if you are frustrated with your own decision-making capacity, if you feel like you're stuck in the same pattern over and over again of, say, for example, one day thinking, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z and really work hard at improving myself, and then you wake up the next morning and maybe you cheated a little bit last night, and your head's just not really in the right space, and you don't have that energy to do anything. I forgot kind of where I was going with that, but what I've found over time is that the best way to actually improve that decision-making apparatus is not to look at it at a moment-to-moment thing or to rely on it moment-to-moment, but to try to have things you do every day, even just little things, that support the decision-making apparatus, that support having that energy to get out of bed on time, that support not making decisions based on just raw emotion, but balancing that with rationality, which is depressingly lacking in my society. And rationality is almost a bad word nowadays, which kind of blows my mind. Anyways, let's take some specific examples. So this morning I spoke about how my moment-to-moment decision-making process went. As soon as I wake up, it's pretty bad. It's mostly about I'm cold, so therefore I want to stay under the covers, and then it's really pretty early in the morning, so I could sleep in, that kind of stuff. What I do to really go to war with option B and then take option A instead, which is to get out of bed and then go for a 40-minute walk in the Canadian winter, which is actually not that bad where I live. We live in like the California of Canada here, Vancouver Island. So it was only like 2 degrees out. What I do is, so last night I actually filled out my to-do list ahead of time. And I don't have to be super specific about it, but I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that, whatever. It just says meditation, exercise, and some other items. So I did my to-do list last night, and I even thought about the fact that I kind of knew this morning I might have a bit of trouble getting out of bed. So then what I do is, way back in time, I'm already kind of predicting that the first few thoughts I have are probably going to be made with a broken decision-making apparatus. So that's how I kind of, first thing in the morning, deal with that. And then you might wonder, why on earth would someone go, some of you might not wonder, but some of you may be wondering, why would someone wake up at 5 a.m. roughly and then go for like a 40-minute walk in the darkness in winter, and then come home, and the next thing on my to-do list was a half hour of meditation. Why would I bother doing that? Literally, the reason I do that, it's not because I enjoy it. It's like, I do enjoy the walk when the weather's not too bad, but sometimes it's really cold and windy, and then it's just like let's get this over with. Obviously, I'm not going to get the pleasure, like an enormous deal of pleasure out of doing that, but what I get out of that is, by the time I get home, and then after my meditation, those two things alone have drastically improved my decision-making process towards productive decisions, towards having the energy to get work done, having the focus to get it done. Whereas if I take the short-term pleasure of sleeping in, for me, I'm not sure if this is the same for you, but almost invariably when I sleep in, I feel like garbage for the rest of the day. I just have this kind of thing going on, just like I'll sit down at my desk and my brain just won't even focus on the work. So I think I've rambled for probably long enough on this particular point, but just to kind of reiterate things, as a very sort of neurotic and analytical thinker, I always approached making better decisions, which is probably the most important thing for an information system such as a human brain to do, is to make good decisions. Instead of approaching it by assuming that if I can just reason about something hard enough in the moment, then I will make a good decision, I try to approach it more from, if I do a whole bunch of things that kind of ruin that decision-making apparatus, or even if it just happens to be that I've woken up first thing in the morning and my brain hasn't been thinking about all my goals and stuff like that, in that moment of time, I can't necessarily trust that decision-making apparatus at all, and my time very likely will be better served in daily habits which do improve the decision-making process. And then you start to, the point where you want to get to with what I'm talking about is, if you do a lot of things every day and you really put effort into this, all of a sudden, instead of feeling like every moment in time is just a battle with yourself, like, oh, why can't I get out of bed? Instead of having that happen all the time, the good decision will become the natural decision. In that moment of time, if option A has low value, and then option B, let's just say option B is like the easy path, the non-productive path, instead of in that moment saying, okay, obviously I need to like just discursively think about motivation and think about all my teachers and really go into why option A is a much better idea than option B, which is a valid thing to do. Instead of all of that mental energy, you'll just go straight to A. And that's where I think you want to head towards, is making good decisions as a natural consequence of the fact that you take care of your mental health and your physical health. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully that was useful, and I'll probably see you in another one of these videos when I feel like rambling again. So thank you, and good luck.